The Nike Zoom Freak 5 is without a doubt the most basic looking and basic structured Zoom Freak shoe in recent memory, but because of all the pros and cons of the Zoom Freak 3 and 4 especially, is that necessarily a bad thing? Now, I should have had this video done about an hour ago and it is getting very, very late, but you know, when I cut it open, I was so surprised at what I saw underneath of it. And so, you know, I kind of went back and looked at, you know, some of the leak videos of the Zoom Freak 5 and saw what people were thinking were going to be in them. And I can tell you right now, it's not what you think on the inside of the shoe. Now, I did get these, you know, verified that these are a genuine Nike product. These are not rip-off shoes. So I know I'm looking at the real thing here. And I think you're going to be pretty surprised. So once again, let's get into them. Now, starting off in the uppers, it is a real Jekyll and Hyde of TPU and leather. It does have a synthetic leather piece that goes all the way around the toe box, comes up into the lace line, and then around the heel counter. Interesting thing is, if you look at that synthetic leather under the microscope, it looks exactly like Formula 23 foam under the microscope. So I'm not sure if there's any connection there. I have no idea. However, the TPU does look like it's kind of like a mixture of textiles going through there, kind of like a smaller TPU strand and then some textile braiding in between there. So it is a nice strong piece. The giant Nike swoosh on the lateral side doesn't really do much in terms of containment. It is a little bit of window dressing. The containment you're getting in this comes really from the leather piece as well as the TPU, which actually is pretty decently strong. And speaking of that leather going up around the lace line on these I really do like because it starts linear in the ankle collar and then it dives medial distally in the shoe versus on some shoes where they do that, it just dives medial right into the ankle collar, and that can have really bad implications for lockdown, for medial stability of the shoe. So that's nice. They also have 4 outrigger lace eyelets here, which are pretty wide, so the shoe ties down pretty nicely, especially for an offset lace line. So in terms of lockdown of the shoe, they are pretty efficient. The surprising thing though about the Zoom Freak 5 was the breathability test, because when I had them on outdoors, air temperature was around 94 degrees Fahrenheit. Core temperature was obviously much higher than that, but my feet did not feel all that hot. Definitely were starting to feel a little boggy. There was definitely a little bit of feeling of marshland in my foot. They were trapping a lot of moisture, but not really heat. And then on the breathability test, only heated up 127.7 degrees and cooled down another 48.5 because the shoe really isn't all that heavy. So it's nice to see that even though there's a little bit more bulky material in the uppers, they're still not super heat trapping. However, they are pretty moisture trapping. But on the opposite end of that spectrum, if you look at the upper durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, the burr starts ripping right through that synthetic leather. There isn't really a drag guard on the medial side either. And even just me, and my footwork is not super forceful or aggressive. I already started wearing down the foam on the tip of the toe. And I did play them a few times, obviously. Usually I'm not able to make that much of a dent in the midsole foam in the amount of time that I have these shoes, but you can see all along there it is starting to rip a little bit. So if you are a dragger or slider, especially on outdoor courts, get ready for these to start looking a little rough. But getting into the midsole teardown of the Zoom Freak 5, this is what had me questioning my own reality for the last hour. But if you look at it on the teardown, all it really is a 4-foot Zoom Air unit that does go all the way across the forefoot. It is pretty wide, but then a pretty elastic Phylon, just full bed. There is no shank in the Zoom Freak 5, bottom loaded or top loaded. And then that indent here in the heel is actually pretty nice because it allows the foam to kind of compress when you're crash landing. So for a shoe this minimal, that is pretty nice. I'm used to seeing Zoom Freak shoes have a ton of tech. Whether I like it or not is a different story, but there's always interesting things to look at with the Zoom Freaks, whether it's the air ducts on the bottom of them, the tandem Zoom Air units or whatever. But this is just a super basic setup. You also see here on the midsole teardown though, underneath where all the holes are for breathing. I think that's why these did pretty well on the breathability test, because there was just space for, you know, air to flow. But if you look at it on the bounce height test, surprisingly 36.5 centimeters in the heel and then 44 centimeters in the forefoot on the Zoom Air unit. So this definitely is a little bit more of an elastic foam setup. I was pretty impressed with that bounce height. I was also pretty impressed with how it felt on foot. It was pretty resilient, however, with no shank in there. You can expect that to start bottoming a little sooner than a shoe, obviously, with a shank on it. And getting into the outsole tread, definitely the most interesting to me. Half of it I love, half of it I really don't. The rear foot, I think, is phenomenal with this giant delta pattern, these huge caverns that make up that delta pattern, it is just phenomenal for grip pretty much on any surface you put these on. Now the heel also has this little cutout here with the reverse swoosh. Now that is pretty nice if you're someone that does need to catch grip on the medial side of your heel, and because it is a little bit of a different pattern versus the plantar side of the shoe, it does just give a little bit of a better bite into the courts. Now the forefoot on these for initial grip is fine on indoor hardwood, outdoor, whatever. However, it's when those treads start to wear a little bit that, because this is like, you know, the Giannis or the Zoom Freak logo, which I think is pretty cool, and I think they could have gotten away with if they made it wider, but because it is so dense and tightly packed in there, as soon as that rubber starts to wear down, it starts to meld together, and so the grip really starts to go. On outdoor courts, you're not going to notice it as much versus on those indoor courts where I think when it starts to get a little bit dusty, you're going to start to notice it. I found the grip on these on indoor courts fine altogether. It wasn't elite level grip. Where the Zoom Freak 5, I think, really starts to turn it around or kind of show its authority on the court is in the speed ratio. It came in at a 3.05, which is pretty darn good for a basketball shoe. And you can really feel that on court because, number one, the Zoom Freak 5 is a lighter weight shoe relatively. It's a little bit lower to the ground. That midsole setup is a little bit more elastic, a little bit more snappy. The Zoom Air unit in the forefoot, although it's not huge, you can feel it because the shoe is so minimal, right? So just relatively, you feel it easier. Plus the shoe is really streamlined. So in terms of going coast to coast or just picking up speed pretty quick, or a shoe that's really unencumbering, it is a pretty quick shoe. Like some of the other Zoom Freaks previously, however, unlike those shoes, it doesn't have some of the instability concerns, which I'll talk about in the playability as well as the fit section. Now, in the outsole durability test, 10 seconds high grit sandpaper, I mean, yeah, about 1 millimeter of damage. However, it's a 4 millimeter tread depth in the heel, which is nuts. Obviously, it goes down to 3 millimeters in the forefoot. You can't have too high of a tread depth in the forefoot. You'll start losing ground feel. You'll start getting unstable. However, pretty impressive that they put that much rubber in the rear foot of these. But taking a look at the fit of the Freak 5, this is a pretty unforgiving shoe for wider feet. Narrow medium foot, just go true to size. A 2E, better be going up a half size on these. And I think even at that, it's gonna be a little bit constricting. So if you don't mind going up a full size, you got longer toes, your foot's a little bit longer, I think you can stand to go up a size if you're a 2E. I'd say if you're really wide, you just might wanna look somewhere else or go with the EP version, you know, half size up from there as well. In terms of the snake bitten foot, you know, these felt very nice underfoot at first, but because, you know, the stack is a little bit lower, because there is no shank, you can throw an orthotic in these because the padding is so good around the ankle collar that they will lock down okay. So I would think with an orthotic, I think they're okay for most, you know, minor little dings you can have around there. But if you're looking for something for more protection, go with something more maximalist. But getting into the playability and performance of the Zoom Freak 5, this is what threw me for such a loop when I tore them open. Because I actually thought the playability of these was pretty good compared to the Freak 3 and Freak 4. You had the same kind of easy gliding movement in these that you did in the 4s, but without the instability concerns, because, you know, the Freak line to me has always been a really nice rapid shoe getting up and down the court. However, side to side, it was always, you know, a little bit of a question mark. The 4s were definitely way better than the 3s, but the 5s to me, because they were just low to the ground, both rear foot and forefoot, they gave me a better sense of the court because the foam in these a little bit more elastic, a little more tightly tuned, gave me a little bit, you know, it's a nice little bouncy feeling. I will say that they're nothing earth-shattering on the court to me. If you're someone that likes a more minimal shoe, you're gonna like them. If you know, if you want to feel low to the ground, but still have, you know, pretty snappy footwork, they're really nice. If you're someone that wants a little bit more out of the shoe, a little more maximalism, if you want the Zoom Freak 3, these aren't it. Even if you want the Zoom Freak 4, it's a bit of a different experience. I'm not really sure where Nike was going with this. Like I said, the performance is good. It's just that I'm just so used to the Freak line having, you know, freakishly cool technology to look at. And this one, it is pretty basic. If you want a more minimal, low to the ground feeling shoe, then I think that they're worth looking at. If you're looking for the 3s or the 4s, then look elsewhere, go start stocking up on old models. But on the Freak 5s, more than any other shoe this year, I just dying to know what you think of these in the comments, just because I was so taken aback by what I saw in the midsole. So I'd love to know, are you a fan more of the minimalist setup, or are you more, wanting the maximal tech in the shoe? So just let me know in the comments down below, especially if you're thinking of buying them. Let me know down below. And if you want to see what basketball shoes I think are the 5 best right now, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam and leather that suspiciously looks like Formula 23. See you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.